weather can kill people. Britain's deepest waterfall, England's deepest waterfall, being actually smashed apart by some of the strongest winds I've ever come across. There's a bit of nature in everyone, and it's just then how much they've tapped into that, I guess. In a storm on the side of a mountain, on a Scottish peninsula, miles from roads, maybe that's the human experience.
If you have ever wanted to understand why we should be asking for nature's help on mindsets, adventures, and more, then you're in the right place. So, welcome to Maximise Nature. Today's guest is JOGONHARRY. Harry Morden has taken over the running scene, bringing inspiration and enthusiasm through screens via his YouTube videos and the outdoors. His latest adventure saw him and 3 other brave explorers brave the Scottish wilderness and trek to the UK's most remote pub. We're going to explore with Harry what his thought process was leading up to, during, and after the challenge, for what plans and promises to be the most glorious pint yet, as well as how he thinks stepping outdoors helps bring the best out of people like you and me. Then we can take his good thoughts and put them in the travel bag, ready to use in our next adventure. Let's introduce Harry to everyone. So, Harry, can you give the listeners a little bit of background into who you are?
Hello. Yes, Max. Thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor. I haven't done a podcast episode in a long, long time. In fact, I think I only ever did one once before. So I thought, when you asked, I thought, yeah, do you know what? It probably is time that I went on an episode and actually spoke about something. So yeah, a bit of background on me. I like your words where you say taken over the running scene. That's quite a nice way of putting it. It makes it sound incredibly grandiose. I don't know about taking over the running scene, but certainly played a small part in trying to express a passion for it, and certainly for meeting other people, which is kind of what Jog On is. So Jog On essentially is a YouTube channel, as a podcast. It started as a podcast. I first came up with the idea in about 2015, and the name Jog On seemed to fit quite well. It was originally called Slob to Running Snob, and it progressed into Jog On.
Nice.
I came out of radio presenting in 2017 and sort of decided I'd really try and pursue the podcast thing. And then, really went from there and started videos. First video came out in March 2019. So I've been going over 5 years now, making YouTube videos as well on the side, that are mostly based around a passion for running and people. But as you sort of already alluded to, there are other types of videos I've started to do, which mostly I'd say are kind of more adventure style videos, and they're often hiking. And certainly the one you're referring to, where we hiked across Knoydart, this Scottish peninsula, that was a heck of an adventure and took 3 days. And yeah, is a massive video. And had you asked me 3 weeks ago how it's doing, I'd have said not very well, because when it first went up on YouTube, it kind of tanked a little bit. It wasn't doing that well. And I was thinking, oh no, I've missed something here. But for whatever reason, the last couple of weeks, it's picked up. So currently at the time of recording, it's 101,000 views. So it's doing okay.
Mad. Yeah. I'd probably say that's more than okay, considering everything else. Yeah, no, that's class. How do you use nature and your passion for content creation and just being outdoors, like you said, adventuring and stuff, to complete this insane adventure and get that glorious pint?
Yeah, so I've always been slightly fascinated by the wilderness and certainly mountainous areas. I've always had a thing for mountains ever since I was young. I haven't really translated that into running in mountains yet. I'm not much of a trail runner. I tend to stick to the roads more. I'm a slightly bigger build. I find I sink into mud, that kind of things. But maybe as I get older, I'll move more and have a look at trying an ultra or something like that. But certainly I guess for me, getting out in the wild is the vehicle I use is hiking as opposed to running. I will jog down the odd hill, etc. So I think I've always been quite inspired by going out into nature, and I've always had a thing for Scotland. I don't know where it comes from or what it is. I don't necessarily have. I've kind of got some distant cousins that live there, but apart from that, there's no family, there's no sort of heritage. I've got no direct ties to Scotland, but ever since I was young, I always sort of fantasized, if you will, about potentially living in Scotland one day, but certainly exploring more of Scotland. I think the wilderness and the mountains there, having Britain's highest mountain, Ben Nevis there, and things like that, make it kind of iconic as a country. I find it quite fascinating. I've always liked Scotland. So that was part of the reason for going up there again. I like visiting Scotland. We got a very long overnight train up there, and which worked really well in the end.
What inspired you to complete this challenge, and what events led you to turn this thought, or should I say pub thought, into a nature-full reality?
Yeah, I like the wording of that. I would say that I'd have to give credit to the people I went with. So I went with 2 Toms and a Chris, 4 of us in total. Now, 2 of them, well, really all 3 of them, but those guys in particular are very, very good at map reading. And so I would give full credit for us not getting lost to them. If it was just me, that would be a completely different thing. And so I just thought it was a really nice blend. It kind of gave the walk purpose. As much as I like the odd hike once in a while, I probably don't do so well if there's not sort of a secondary purpose to it. If it's just a hike and enjoy the views, it might not be quite enough to stimulate me into wanting to do the adventure. If it's something like there's this crazy pub that we'll put at halfway, but sort of quite far away, Britain's most remote pub. If we can sort of visit that at a midway point, that gives it a bit more purpose. I've done other things with those guys where we did the Yorkshire Three Peaks, and in the middle of that, we went to go see, I don't want to get the terminology wrong, but it's something like Britain's deepest waterfall, England's deepest waterfall. And it's this sort of, this river just plunges underground into this amazing cave system. And so we decided to go see that. And for me, that kind of gives the walk that little bit of extra incentive, that little bit of purpose. For some people, it's bagging peaks, whether that be Munros or other things, and actually getting to the top of a mountain. I like the narrative structure of climbing a mountain. I like that there's this kind of, you surmount the top, but then you still have to get down. Just going for a loop walk is something harder. So for me, as well as enjoying the nature, I like that there's a little bit of something extra. There's a little bit of purpose to it. And that's kind of what Noida offered with Britain's most remote pub.
Yeah, I watched the video on it, and please, people who are listening, go and watch it because it is a really, really good video. What was your thought process when setting yourself this challenge? And is there truth to the phrase, you're only one crazy conversation away from a crazy adventure?
Definitely, if you're willing to accept whatever comes out of that conversation. The conversation that I had was, should we do a bit of a hike again in 2024? You have to go a fair few months back to when we were planning it. So I'd say my memory's a little weak on what exactly was discussed. I know there were a couple of options, but we were sort of honing in on Scotland. We spent our childhood growing up hiking in Dartmoor. So there was a brief conversation about whether we went and did a hike in Dartmoor again. Scotland came up. It feels like a grand, bigger adventure. When you're coming from the south of England, Scotland feels like a very long way away. So it's this sort of distant land that's fun to go to and explore. And it kind of... I think someone else, I don't think it was me. I think someone else had suggested Noidart. And that was when I sort of put 2 and 2 together that there was this remote pub. And of course, my brain's ticking over thinking YouTube titles and a potentially good video for that to document the adventure. Because the beauty is as well, you can always go and do these things. And I've done this before. People think that, everything they see is what I've gone and done. But often you go and not too often, but a lot of the time you do go and film something and it just isn't good enough. It just doesn't make sense. I like to put a certain standard bar, and if it doesn't meet that bar, then I'm not going to release the video. I'm not going to edit the video and put it all together. I've been all the way to Portugal and not many people know this, but I've been all the way to Portugal and ran a half marathon. And it was a disastrous experience. Couldn't really find the narrative thread in it. It was a bit all over the place. So I just ditched it. And I went all the way to Portugal and didn't do it. So I think, with Noida, if it hadn't made sense, I still would have enjoyed the hike and the adventure and the experience. But after we finished, I thought, that's definitely worth putting the time and the effort. It's a lot of time and effort to turn this into something that's actually documents this experience. And it seems to be doing okay so far.
100%. Like, there's been times where I wanted to do like Instagram posts or stuff like that, and it's just not been worth it. Because you need to find the right moment for it to really mean something to you. Because realistically, if it doesn't mean anything to you, good luck making it mean anything to the audience. It needs to come across. What were the challenges that you faced before, during, and after?
Cool. So challenges. Because of the guys being good planners and good map readers, something that I am definitely not, that meant that kind of alleviated some of the potential problems that would be happening if I was taking charge of an adventure like that. It's not to say I didn't make myself vaguely familiar with the route, so I had a clue about what was going on, but I'm just someone who doesn't have a very good sense of direction, doesn't read maps well. It's almost ironic, really, considering the amount of hiking I have done over my lifetime. And in my early 30s now, there's a lot more hiking to come. But I've just never really clicked that well with map reading, taking a bearing from a compass, that kind of thing. So I would say that issues before were really just general planning and making sure that we got the right train, that everyone kind of was going to meet up at the right time, because different people were coming from different places, that kind of thing. And then during, watch the video. Just like the weather being actually smashed apart by some of the strongest winds I've ever come across. And I've been in some pretty strong winds, but to be actually blown off my feet was quite an experience. Very heavy rain. Just I would say general fatigue. The beauty, that's one of the strong points, is that within that group, most of us, and certainly myself, one of the other guys who do a fair bit of running, had the fitness to get through it. And I think that's one of those things that if someone was doing it, they should certainly just check in with where their fitness is at, because it's a very fatiguing experience. It's a very physically demanding experience. But yeah, greatly enjoyed it. And then afterwards, any challenges? I guess just the journey back. You don't really get a chance to shower. You've got to go back on the trains. You're sort of like trying to clean yourself up a bit in a train bathroom and be very respectable.
Yeah.
You're sort of traipsing back through London still in your hiking boots. So stuff that you're fairly used to if you do big hikes. It's that kind of coming back into society, not as in being accepted back into society. I should hope that would work.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
In terms of just feeling like a human again. But then, I don't know. Then in a weird way, you could argue that being in a storm on the side of a mountain on a Scottish peninsula, miles from roads, maybe that's the human experience. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. You feel you're very aware of what the power of nature in that moment. And you're humbled by it, I guess. You feel sort of insignificant, but in a way that's quite pleasing. So if you want to get on a more philosophical level, that's quite a nice part of it. But yeah, do you hike much, Max, as well as running?
I do, yeah. So when I went to uni, I did physical geography. So that's a lot of field work.
Yep.
However, 2020, we all know what happened.
Yep.
So I went to uni in Cardiff. We literally went to Pembury, did a day there, and then came straight back. But in terms of like hiking outside, yeah, I do. So when last November, I went to Australia and New Zealand.
Amazing.
And some of those hikes were crazy, like so pretty. Not too windy, I'm glad to say, but very, very pretty. And then because me and my family have always been obsessed with the outdoors, went up Ben Nevis, which was quite the experience, because I was so small, but I got to the top, and then disaster struck, and I had cramp the entire way down. Not just a little cramp, a deadly cramp. And I'm the only positive to come out of that, apart from climbing Ben Nevis, is so many people gave me free Mars bars. It was great.
Did experiences like that when you're that young, does that kind of build that passion for being outdoors and stuff, do you think, going through stuff like that?
100%, yeah. I mean, when I was growing up, I'd probably say that, and then TV programs I used to watch. So Blue Peter was a big one. Deadly 60, Steve Batchel, if you're watching, I'd love to get you on.
Yeah. He'd be a great guest.
He would be, yeah, no. Literally dream guest. But I'd definitely say what was your question? I went on a bit of a tangent then.
No, just basically, do you think that those kind of experiences when you were younger informed your love now of being outside in nature and getting out there?
100%. You see it not even with me, you see it with film directors, with people who just want to surf, kayak or anything. There's always that little bit of nature that's in everyone. At least that's what I believe anyway. And I don't know if you agree with this, but for me, a rainy day in the hills beats a dry day in the office any day. But 2000%, I'd say the outdoors definitely impact you.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting thing, and it does seem to be. There's, I don't know. Yeah, I think absolutely. There's a bit of nature in everyone, and it's just then how much they've tapped into that, I guess, and how much they've. Because some people just don't even. If you grew up in a city and your parents weren't into going out hiking, people go to the Brecon Beacons for the first time at the age of 31 and just are completely stunned by it. It's an incredible thing to do, because if you've been growing up in a sort of a concrete jungle, then something like Snowdonia is an incredibly overwhelmingly potentially positive or negative thing, depending on how you look at it. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. I was dragged a lot on hikes by my parents. We used to go out on a lot of Sundays were the big time to walk, and as a kid, I remember
Yeah.
not particularly enjoying it at the time. But then when you get older, you sort of start to understand those experiences a bit more. But yeah, as I say, that's why I kind of mentioned mountainous areas. There's something about mountains in particular. Flat walking, not as excited by. I would rather be running. When it's mountains, I'm more interested. Yeah.
There's a little bit more, for me anyway, there's a little bit more adventure to it, isn't there, really?
There's a dangerous element as well. Like there's a
yeah, and that
sort of the humbling nature of the fact that this could go wrong. And requires a bit more planning, a bit more strategy, a bit more skill, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, you just perfectly segued into my next question. What would you do differently, considering you mentioned all of those things about planning and everything?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, honestly, if it wasn't for filming the video, I genuinely would be quite happy to have walked from the car park we walked from to the pub and then caught the ferry back. Now, that day, the ferries weren't running, gives you an idea of how bad the weather was. So we couldn't have caught the ferry that day by chance. We weren't to know that. So we would have had to have stayed overnight. One of the guys almost did because he, I think it was ankle or leg. He'd kind of rolled his ankle. So he was struggling a bit, but amazingly got back. So fair play to him. But he was generally talking about getting a ferry back. When we worked out where the crazy round trip he'd have to do to get back to where he needed to be, which I think eventually was Inverness, if I remember correctly. It just didn't seem worth it, and it was worth him sort of just trying to slowly battle his way back, with three of us helping him, and he did great in the end. But yeah, the only thing I'd do differently is if I was doing it again, but not filming it for a video, is get there and then got the ferry back. Now, you could make the video from a narrative perspective. You could have your sort of pinnacle ending as getting to the pub, cheers, there's the pint, and then it sort of doesn't matter how we got back. But I just felt like there were other videos out there that had done that. I wanted to make it that the pub was part of it, but it was about getting back as well. And I'm so glad we did, because the journey back was the hardest part. And that's where the weather turned on us. And so it was this sort of struggle to get back. And there were some moments along that where you're thinking, we've put ourselves in a pretty dodgy situation here just for a pint. But thankfully, we all are experienced. We had a lot of equipment with us. There were four of us. We had a GPS satellite phone on us, things like that. So we put a lot of things in place to make sure that we're safe, which is always a major priority. And I think there's also, you have a responsibility when you're on video and you know that quite a few people might end up watching this, that you're sort of leading by example and demonstrating good practice, that you're not doing dangerous stuff out there. So that's the one thing I do differently, but that's the lazier part of me talking. That lovely walk, not really even lovely, hard walk there, but then ferry back would be lovely. That's what I do differently.
Okay, nice. Now that you've completed the challenge, can you think of ways where nature has given you the helping hand, both mentally and physically?
Probably from the perspective of the break from the sort of hamster wheel of life. I don't personally think I am much on that hamster wheel. If you follow me day to day, you'd realize that what I do is probably quite different from a normal, in air quotes, lifestyle. But yeah, I think just being away, especially when you go out somewhere for like 2.5 to 3 days, that's a really long period of time. There's no signal on your phone, so that's out the window, and you want to save your battery anyway. So you kind of unplug somewhat. I'm sure you know that feeling. So for me, from a physical perspective, nothing too crazy different. If I'm running 5-6 times a week to physically fatigue myself or aim to get fitter, get my heart rate up, that's not something I'm remotely unfamiliar with. But in terms of the psychological benefits, yeah, I think that's the bit I'd probably notice more with going out into nature and sort of, just that kind of complete peacefulness that you find. I think there's a section in the video where, we'd walked like 2.5 hours. We've been walking and we saw another hiker. And you think what that's actually like to actually go 2.5 hours traveling forwards on foot and not seeing, certainly not a car because there's no roads, not a plane in the sky or anything like that. But to not even see another person is really quite a peaceful experience. And then when you do finally see that person, you stop and talk because it's more unique that you're seeing that person, unlike the other extreme being like center of London where no one's saying hello and it's just, you're just part of a massive system. So, so psychological, to answer your question, psychological peacefulness and break, that for many people, I think acts as a bit of a psychological reset. I'd be interested to see whether that if you could take a sort of a stressed group of 100 people in a city and then take them away for 3 days to somewhere like Knoydart, what effect that would have. It'd be an interesting thing. I'm not going to sit here and say it would have this effect. I think everyone's different, but it would certainly be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, that's a really interesting. Sorry. That's a really interesting point, especially with all of the like stresses of daily life and everything. And I found that when did I go? Maybe when was it? Yes, when I was 17, 18, I went to Zambia for 2 weeks, and I found that little bit of a reset off AS levels and everything really set me up very nicely to do my exams and then eventually get here. But it's definitely the reset I needed around that time, because it was obviously my first exams and everything. But it's just nice to take that break.
And I think it's, if you look at it as like a tool, if you're ever in a position where you are starting to find like things are becoming a bit too much, or you're too busy or too stressed, I think booking in, certainly even if people have a 9 to 5 job, work Monday to Friday, Friday night, head up somewhere and take Saturday and Sunday to just hike in the hills somewhere, safely, responsibly, then I think it can be an amazing tool for certain people that might work for them to, like you say, just reset and unplug. You've probably experienced that as well, just that ability to sort of disconnect slightly.
Yeah. With your hike and everything, obviously you can do all different kinds of hikes: steep, long, treacherous, quite like easy ones as well. Would you say, or would you recommend any basic equipment for anyone?
Yeah, it depends what you're doing. I mean, the first thing is, if you're even starting at a basic level, I would not recommend that you walk across Knoydart. I mean, just don't do that if you're not experienced at hiking. Yeah. There's two. I mean, I'm not necessarily qualified to speak on hiking safety, because I might have done a fair bit over my life, but compared to some people out there who it's really their passion, then I would have to bow to wiser minds on this. But one thing I try to go by is just from the perspective of sort of like, there's kind of like a sort of a double golden rule that I use when I go out on these adventures. I know this is kind of sort of equipment related, but I can answer that one as well, which is really to kind of try and tick 2 boxes when you head out. And so one is to not be solo, if you can be. Now, I get that there's a certain psychological benefit for being completely alone. And the other one is to have some kind of contact to the outside world. Certainly when you don't have mobile signal, that would come in the form of some kind of satellite phone. We hired one for Knoydart. It was like I forget the name of the model. It was a Garmin. And it meant that at any point, my friend Chris could actually send sort of short texts off it as well. But he could also make a call from it if he needed to. It was reasonably pricey to hire, but well worth it had we been in any trouble. It just meant no matter where we were on that mountain, we had contact to the outside world. And likewise, if one of us, something had gone wrong, someone's had an accident, having 3 fit sort of prime age males with you is a massive advantage to help you stay safe and possibly get out of there if needed, though whether we'd have to have formed some kind of makeshift stretcher, I don't know. But certainly in terms of mountain rescue, getting a helicopter in, etc. So those are the 2 big rules. So having at least someone else with you, if not a couple of people with you, so you're not alone. But then the other one, having contact about the outside world at all times, which you could say flies in the face a little bit of that whole unplugging and disconnecting. But when you have a satellite phone, trust me, that it's nothing like a social media device. It's not a distracting thing. You stick it in your bag, easy access that you can grab it if you need to in an emergency. And then, you've just got that as a lifeline, really. So those, in terms of equipment, that's kind of what I'd recommend maybe as a number one if you are going into the depths of the wilderness. But certainly I would say, like with running, etc., it's kind of that slow ramping up that if you are beginning, I would approach it bit by bit. I'd recommend YouTube as a resource to start to find people who do hiking YouTube channels. I'm sure you've watched some stuff, Max. It's there's some really good stuff out there, and people who know what they're talking about. I think just starting with decent basic footwear, and then building up from there bit by bit. But the big thing I'd say is building up the walks that you do and the hikes and the adventures bit by bit, and never overstretching yourself. So I guess when we're in a running race, we're sort of usually on a marked course. There's a marshal nearby, there's some crowd, etc. When you go out into these wild places, those sort of boundaries are slightly removed. So I think it's kind of important that you do something that you're pretty confident that you can handle fairly easily, because overstretching yourself and then becoming too fatigued, too exhausted, sort of having problems with exposure, etc. That's not the place to find that you are starting to struggle, because you have to get yourself off the mountain, things like that. I'd build in slowly and find what works for you. And you don't want to have a negative experience either. You don't want to go out, have an absolutely awful couple of days on some big adventure, having barely even walked 6 miles before around a country park, and then sort of negatively associate with going out in nature and hiking, and sort of think, well, I'm not doing that again. I'm going back to the office. I think it's the kind of thing where you want to build up slowly. But yeah, have you got a lot of equipment, Max? Being a nature person, are you at ISAC's level? Where are you at?
I wouldn't say I have a lot, but I have enough for me to get around. Like, I have the poles, the boots. I mean, it's not a necessity, but when I want to build this brand, the phone as well. But I mean, being a physiographer, I also have a hard hat, a high vis. I look like Bob the Builder, 9 to 5. It's great
Awesome.
fun. No, but realistically, I am probably one of the best examples. But you don't really need too much. You just need to know roughly what your level is and what you need, what you're going to get yourself into, really, for things like hikes and everything. And I definitely say like watching YouTube videos, watching like different things to really get the best, not only the best out of it, but feel the most prepared. Is probably my top tip.
Absolutely. My friends are good enough at map planning that not only do they then plan the route, but they will also put in a couple of sections here and there. If one of the group is struggling or something's gone wrong, we have a sort of a plan B that will cut it short. So they even put in sort of shortcuts or turn-offs, or we can follow this path that will lead us to this road or whatever, or this pub. So they've kind of got backups along the way as well, which is a really clever thing and a really wise way to do it, rather than just being like, we're just going to complete, just always assuming that you'll get around, or because I think one of the things when you get into nature, and you've even already referenced this, but weather is something that we just think of as like, sometimes it's raining, sometimes it's sunny. And when you spend a lot of time in a house or buildings, you don't really appreciate how harsh weather can get until you're out in these places. And weather can kill people. Like, exposure is a thing. And that's one of the hardest things to get your head around when you first get into this, about how dangerous weather can be. Because you just think, well, how hard can it rain? But when you really are out there, and you really, certainly if you've ever get caught out in a storm, as I have only a couple of times, it's a really eye-opening experience where you really start to feel more vulnerable, and you start to realize, oh, this can turn on you pretty quickly. And that's the thing, it can happen so quickly. And if you are underprepared and you have overstretched yourself and put yourself in a position that you aren't comfortable getting out of, things can take a turn. It's really refreshing, by the way, to not be talking about running. It's quite nice. I love talking about running, but it's quite nice to be talking about things that are a bit more specific to hiking and nature. So thanks, Max.
Absolutely no problem. That's what I'm out here to do, I guess. Even though I'm recording this in my little office, yeah. I love talking about it. And what training maps, books, social media posts, or people or guides have you used to help organise your journey before you even stepped out the door? And could you recommend any to our audience?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to now reference a couple of the YouTube channels I watched, but I just don't remember the names off the top of my head. But certainly starting on YouTube to find some people, because also people will vibe with different people. So there'll be someone that you like and you find. And there's a guy called Paul someone, I've forgotten his name, who I started off watching like stuff about different tents he recommended, and then it's built out from there. The one thing I'd say on that subject, I mean, just going back to the equipment thing, is where as runners, there's only so much we can really invest in, like some running clothing, and shoes are the big one. Outside of that is basically race entries. The thing about once you get into getting out in nature, or if that's hiking or you're a wild camper, etc., whatever angle with nature you like, or you're someone who runs in the wild a bit more, it is amazing how quickly you can go down the rabbit hole of getting excited by equipment, and all of a sudden you've never even looked at like a gas stove before, but now you're really excited about what's the most lightweight gas stove I can get for under 90 pounds or whatever. So yeah, you can go down this kind of rabbit hole in terms of getting more and more equipment, and I would just say only do that once you really know that you're passionate. You go get out there a few times and know that you are liking this and you want to invest in it. I think hiking and camping is one of those things that people sort of, they get an amazing tent, they get an amazing pair of walking boots, and they do like one trip away. and then sort of it just gets left in the cupboard, and they go, "Oh, I haven't got that tent out for like 2 years now." At which point it's a bit of a waste, and there are things you can hire as well. So I think it's worth experimenting and really establishing is this something I can do moving forwards? Am I someone who's going to regularly get out into the nature, into wild, and explore? Really, there's a reason on the back of the top I'm wearing right now, the jog on top, it says connecting people through a love of running and adventure, and I've always left that and adventure in because I always knew that I would do the odd hiking video, walk up a mountain, etc. And I like to think that jog on, even though jog is in the name, that this idea that you can move through the gears of running, and ultimately the slowest form of that is a very slow walk right through to a sprint. There's levels along the way, and that we shouldn't ignore the fact that people can walk. And in fact, walking up a big mountain, trust me, has been as strenuous, if not more strenuous, than many of the runs I've done. When you're really going up a big rocky hill, it gets tough. But yeah, in terms of recommending, I would recommend you, if you're like me and you're not very good at map reading, I would link up with people, find a friend who is good at map reading, who's going to help you out and just lend an eye. Would I trust myself to fully map read solo the entire way? Probably not. I'm not very good at it, and I have practiced, and I'm just not naturally good at it. So I would definitely have a look on YouTube as well. There's some great books out there on bits and pieces, but again, without having a list in front of me, I wouldn't be able to recommend anything directly. But definitely look around and start to explore it some more. Is there anyone you follow on YouTube about this stuff, Max?
I'd probably say for me, like I've always, especially over the last 5 years, been more about like their mentality rather than what they actually do. So obviously I see your YouTube videos, you're really upbeat, positive. And then with people like, so my big like sporting, no, not really, but yeah, like Kobe Bryant, Marcus Rashford, flipping, what's his name, Steve Irwin. Really anyone adventurous, including Philly Bowden as well as another one. Because like how she views different challenges, marathon, no marathon, day-to-day stuff is really inspiring as well. But I've always been more of a personality type.
I think it's a great way to look at it, because it's right. Like I was saying about you got a vibe with the right person earlier. That's kind of what you're getting at, is that you have to find them sort of, there's a relatability there and something about the way they talk that you'll just connect with, and then go from there, really. I guess you can search out more of their stuff. I remember watching Ray Mears on TV and doing like bushcraft survival stuff. I know that Bear Grylls was probably a secondary version of that in a slightly later generation. But yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah, no. One thing I have always tried to like keep in mind, well, for me anyway, is that you'll always learn something off of someone. Like even if it's in like this for a podcast or like a flipping 5-second conversation, you're always going to learn the smallest thing, which you might not realize at the time, but could actually lead to quite a big, like, not change, but like have a massive influence on you at a later date. So going back to the hike, what's one treat? I mean, for me, it's either Aero, KitKat, or something like that you always have on the go, or that you had when you battled. No, you can't eat them when the wind's blowing at you, can you? After the wind, sorry. What's one treat that you'd have after you got battered by the wind? Or like something on the trek?
On that hike, it was chocolate. I remember there being a couple of chocolate bars. I'm probably should go easy on chocolate, but definitely can just eat chocolate like throughout the hike. That's a very bland and sort of vague answer, but that's the truth. I have a particular love for white chocolate in particular. I know that after it is weird after you've been battered like that and gone through that kind of weather and just gone whew, it almost does get an appetite up, because you're kind of grateful to be alive, and then you think, I'm quite hungry now. So anything with white chocolate or chocolate on is pretty good. And then the thing I've found, as I'm sure you know, is like just hot food, because you're just out in the cold, especially if you go at certain times of the month, that being able to use like the gas stove and heat something up, whether that be a boil in the bag or something, it's amazing how much it sort of raises morale just having some hot food. There's something about the warmth of food. Like food is great, but then another level is that when that food is warm, that you find that when you're out in the elements that you really do appreciate. So anything that's like a hot meal as well, I'd add in there with the chocolate thing is something that certainly when we got back that evening to the bunkhouse, which fortunately had spare bunk beds, we heated up some boil in the bag meals. And, you can just have like a carbonara or something. They do quite amazing boil in the bags now. Not cheap, but certainly worth it if you can afford to get one for the trip. It kind of almost keeps you hiking down. You think, right, I'm going to heat up this boil in the bag in a bit, and I'll look forward to that. Anything to kind of motivate you to just keep walking when all you want to do is really just sit down because you're knackered. But so hot food as well is the other thing I'd say in terms of treats that help get me through.
Food, heated food, white chocolate, they're all incredible after adventure, in the middle of one, say if you're staying overnight or something, or just to have on the go, really. Speaking of sweet, or in your case hot treats, let's swap some treats for some truths in a game I like to call the Sweet Truth. So Harry, your task is to tell me one truth and 2 falsehoods about your adventure or anything to do with nature, and then I must pick the sweet truth correctly. Either I get the sweet victory of picking the truth, or you get the sweet victory of persuading me to pick incorrectly. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready to play.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my friend fell in a river, but I didn't capture it on camera. I ordered 2 pints at the pub rather than just one. And when we got back to the van, it was all sunny. And then I say the van, the truck, but then just at the last minute, it absolutely started pouring down again. And we got soaked just after we changed into dry clothes. So 2 pints at a pub, friend fell in a river and got soaked just as we put dry clothes on at the truck.
If your friend fell in the river, why didn't you put it on your YouTube channel? Surely that's clickbait.
wasn't recording at the time.
Okay. 2 pints at the pub. Ooh. Oh, I should have asked you how you are with alcohol before. No. 2 pints. What was it a pint of?
I genuinely don't remember. It would have been a lager. It wouldn't have been like a heavy beer or anything. It would have been a tap lager. I'll guess Carlsberg, but it probably wasn't that.
Okay. What was the third one?
Third one was that when as soon as we put our dry clothes on back at the truck, it started pouring down with rain, and we got soaked before we even got back in the truck again, kind of thing. Which one's true?
First one was what?
First one was, I don't know what the first one was. First one was falling in the river. Second one, 2 pints rather than 1 pint. Third one, soaked dry clothes.
I feel like the 2 pints is true purely because you didn't hesitate when I asked you what beer it was. It seemed quite natural, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah. No, it's not. I did only have 1 pint. The naturalness was that I did have a pint, and I genuinely can't really remember what it was of. But yeah, I didn't have 2. No, the truth was that we literally got all our dry clothes on, and just as almost all on. So hence why we couldn't just dive straight in the truck, and just got absolutely soaked again. It just started pouring. It was like really bad timing. If it just held off 5 more minutes, we would have been in the truck and dry. So then we had towels again, and we're trying to dry ourselves off again. It was like a sort of a last hurrah from Noidart, just being like, just as we got to the truck, tapped it. Hey, I think my friend Chris went down to the river to do like a bit of a river wash, being the wild man that he is. So that was kind of unfortunate. But yeah, the 2 pints one is tricky because that's just like a really, well, it could be I had 2 or 1 pint, something too crazy. But yeah, definitely no one fell in a river. That's a more extreme.
That would have been.
I didn't think you'd go for that one, to be fair.
No.
That's
I wouldn't, because knowing you, I don't think you'd be the type of person to just go away.
And even if I'd like not caught that on camera, I'd have caught like the aftermath and mentioned it.
Yeah,
it's a major event on the video, and it's not in the video. So yeah, you did well to decipher that.
Now, Harry, for the listeners, when you got back to the van, or whatever high point you remember being the most magical, when, of course, you weren't receiving that hairdryer treatment from the winds. What do you remember about that moment? Just so people listening can live the experience vicariously through you. Because because you said it yourself on your video that you experienced a sense of relief and triumph.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would definitely say for me, often the high point is the getting back and then knowing it's finished and it's over. When you've been out there that long and you've been battered by the winds and you've not showered for 3 days and it's been a really long journey to get there, and you've been exposed to the elements, you've been trying to dry your socks in the bunkhouse, but they're not fully dry and you've had to put them on the next day. Your legs are aching because you've just been walking so much going up and down these hills. That it's just such a sort of just a glorious sense of a bit of achievement, but I think as sort of fully grown men who are have done a few things with their lives now, the sense of achievement is never quite as strong as you'd hope it would be. But it feels satisfying for sure. I think if I was, a 19-year-old who'd just done it, maybe it would be a more significant thing in that way. But certainly the relief, it's sort of that type 2 fun that we've made ourselves, put ourselves in a lot of discomfort. So then the comfort of being in that truck while we were a little bit wet now was a really nice thing. And just to sit there and kind of like do that breathe out where you just kind of, it's almost like let out, okay, it's done now. It's a really big moment. I think sometimes I think we almost do all this stuff, whether it be running a race or hiking up a big mountain, just for the sort of the feeling afterwards to have sort of gone deep down to then rise back up to hit what essentially should just be like level and would you not even think of while you're sitting around your house, but you just appreciate the fact that you're no longer in pain. It's quite a nice feeling. And then I'm sure there'll be some sort of scientific element of getting the endorphins afterwards as well, having achieved that and put your body through that. So the final moment getting back to the truck and just knowing there's no more hiking is a weight off the shoulders, literally as you take your bag off as well, and psychologically. And for me, that's probably one of the most powerful moments. And as a slightly naturally lazier person, I generally find that, that hits me that bit harder than someone else who might go, right, tomorrow, guys, we're going to go do another hike. Like I'm done. That's all the hiking I need to do for months. I'm absolutely sorted. If I can do a 3-month hike across some Scottish wilderness, that's enough of an intensive experience that I'm very satisfied with that adventure, that I don't need to go on another adventure for a little while.
No, I 100% agree with that. Like people vary. Like even recording, people like vary in what they want to talk about, how they come across and everything. And I kind of find that really motivating to make even more of these episodes. I imagine that to be an incredible experience. Some people would want to experience Scotland or the open wilderness for the first time, or even something as simple as going somewhere they haven't been before. Where's your next adventure, and do you promise to come back and tell us about it?
I definitely can't promise that, because I'd hate to break the promise just because you never know what's around the corner. But certainly if I get the opportunity to, I know that there is an idea to run across Scotland that's brewing for 2025. Often in the Jog On videos, I say often, actually very rarely, but it is cool to run across a country. And probably the most notable has been when I ran across Wales with a friend called Alex. And that was a massive run. It's still the furthest I've ever run. And of course, following up on that, someone would want to know how far the distance was. If I remember correctly, I believe we ran 48 miles, which I think is about 77 kilometers in one day, one go. So that was a massive run, biggest run I've ever done by a long way. And we crossed Wales from the border with England right across to Aberystwyth and into the sea. So that was an amazing experience. It's a heck of a video if anyone wants to go and find it. Just a heck of an adventure to go on. So there's always that thing of running across a country. It's quite a cool video idea. Hellish in practice, like actually doing it, you're halfway through thinking, what on earth are we doing? Why have we signed up to this? And I'm there, holding an action camera, trying to capture moments as well. So you're trying to produce something as well as putting out this incredibly significant amount of physical effort to complete this thing. So I think running across Scotland is potential. That's probably the one I'd offer up as maybe the next thing I'll do, which certainly will be getting out there in nature, no doubt about it. In terms of hikes, don't know at the moment. I know that same sort of group, the two Toms, Chris and myself, might look at doing a big hike again in 2025. But honestly, as I've already sort of alluded to, I think I'm at a level where now, having done a fair bit of getting out there in nature, one big trip honestly, I can almost do one a year, and I'm kind of okay with that. And I think that's because I do so much running that kind of tops me up on the whole, scratching that itch of wanting to physically exercise and get out there. On sort of, if you run in the right places, it can almost be a mini adventure in and of itself. But in terms of those big scale adventures, multi-day adventures, a huge run across a country, for example, or a big hike across some wilderness, that I could do annually and be okay with that. And Dartmoor is always another place that I like to go back to. So there might be something to do with Dartmoor as well. That's probably what might be coming up for a next adventure.
Was there anywhere for the listeners to follow you or find out even more about what you do, say your Instagram page and everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So where it all began with the podcast, you can search on any podcast app, whether that be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. You can just search Jog On. You don't need to type in Jog On with Harry Morgan or the Jog On podcast or anything. Just write the words Jog On. It will come up. You'll see the orange of the logo and the sort of the thumbnail, if I can call it that, on the podcast. Then on YouTube, again, just type in Jog On. It'll come straight up. You don't even need to do the full title of Jog On with Harry Morgan. Look for videos there. If you're thinking adventure video, I'd say maybe the Run Across Wales or the Knoydart video, which is like one of the latest videos at the time of recording. Then website is kind of the hub of all things Jog On. If you just want to get an overview of what Jog On does, our tagline, connecting people through running so I should say it more slowly, connecting people through a love of running and adventure being the tagline gives you an idea. But go to the website, thisisjogon.com. That's thisisjogon.com. And then finally on social media, it tends to be at thisisjogon. That was kind of born a little bit out of, it's hard to get the tag or the handle for just Jog On because it's a very it's a more common phrase than people might realize, and I do tend to say I'm Harry Morgan and this is Jog On at the end of things, and so that's kind of where This Is Jog On came out of. It's quite strong, the email as well being thisisjogon@gmail.com if people have any questions. But yeah, so generally I think it's cool to find people that follow some of the ecosystem of Jog On, whether that be watch the videos, listen to a podcast episode. People can dip in and dip out. And yeah, we've created this kind of cool community that's global now. We've sent we do Jog On merchandise, we do running tops, we do caps, we do socks, and we send these out to Australia, America, not just in the UK now. So it really is growing, and it's a really exciting thing to see. And certainly at the heart of Jog On, it's about connecting with other people. It's about supporting each other in our journeys through running. And as I say, that phrase "and adventure" is there on the tagline for a reason. And I hope, certainly as I get older as well, to explore some of that, the adventure side of things a bit more.
This probably won't go in the episode, but it's just a question I had. Can you think of anyone in any part of life, say adventure trail, social media, running, etc., that you think would be really good to have on the podcast? So
David Attenborough, the age of 98, would be one. Steve Backshaw, maybe Robert Irwin, son of Steve Irwin, would be a cool one. He'd be an amazing, high energy person to talk to. That'd be fantastic. A friend of mine, Tom, he's called Tom Fitzjohn, who came on the trek with us, might be an interesting person to chat to. He trained with the Marines. He now works with the military police and has done a lot of adventures himself, hiked a lot in Dartmoor, has a lot of gear and the idea as well. He knows what he's doing. He's a good map reader. So he's certainly someone who's got some interesting stories from different hikes he's done and other places he's been and whatnot. So he'd be an interesting person to talk to, and just someone who's got that experience and what it was like training with the Marines as well. And some of the stuff they did. I know some of their like their rucks and stuff they do are just mental, and going out into Dartmoor and hiking with heavy packs overnight and stuff. So yeah, he'd have some interesting stories as well. So that'd kind of be a potential personal recommendation.
Sorry. Thank you very much for joining us on the Maximise Nature podcast, Harry.
No problem.
Just before I wrap this up, did you manage to, or did you figure out what nature phrase I fitted into this podcast?
Yeah, I've got, I feel like it's a reasonably simple one. Yes, I just wrote down "climb that mountain" because I feel like you could use that in a phrase that could just be something fairly philosophical. It doesn't need to be too literal. But "climb that mountain" was the phrase.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Did you manage to figure out the one I fitted into today's?
Not at all. I've been listening out, but like had no idea, unless they were just like, say, Harry Morgan has taken over the running scene, which I think you said very early on. Then I have no idea.
It was "rainy day in the hills beats a dry day in the office."
Oh, okay. I just thought that was like a motto you live by.
Sure.
Fair enough.
No, but that's what I tried to do every single episode, and so far no one's got it. So long may that continue.
Oh, I'd love to hear what David Attenborough would give you. Same.
Really manifesting David Attenborough right now. But anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me on, Max. It's been really good to chat. And as I said earlier in the podcast episode, it's been nice to talk about something not running related. Not to say that I don't enjoy talking about running, but it's something a little bit more outside of the norm because Jog On is so heavily running based. It's been nice to talk about that and adventure part that sometimes I think can get missed by people who follow Jog On. That's partly because I don't create a huge amount of content around it. I hiked in Knoydart this year. I ran across Wales 2 years ago now. So the videos about that subject matter are fewer. So yeah, it's been cool to talk about it. So thanks for having me on.
Until next time, you're Harry Morgan. You went for that hike, and this is the Maximise Nature Podcast. Get out and explore what's beyond your front door. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow Maximise Nature on Instagram for more nature-based content. See you next time.